Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarashaya Bhajamam Smadashaya Payam Vande Guru Paramparam Vishvara Guratmiti Muji Veda Vibhagine Yomata Vyakta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sarva Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatosh Maha Om Shanti 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 Om. Welcome to our Vivekachudamani webinar. Of course, we are on the verse 67. The verse 67 says that limitless consciousness is existence and knowledge. It is self-evident. It is ever-present, pure, beyond Maya, and it is the joy unconditioned by time-bound experiences. So now, the verse begins with limitless consciousness being equated to existence and knowledge. So for those of us who do not understand clearly this, the equanimity or the equation consciousness equal knowledge, okay? We understood that limitless, that existence and knowledge are sat chit. So the two natures or aspects of consciousness. But we heard several times the verse, the steps equating consciousness with knowledge. So we know that consciousness is that which can know things, you know. Consciousness is that in which things may be known, may be seen, may be experienced. So consciousness is the knowingness that operates in our intellect. In the intellect of all jivas, not only human jivas, there is consciousness. This consciousness, once it's associated with a jiva, becomes knowingness. Knowingness is a good word. I like this word. I picked it up long ago from the Neo Advaita, and at the beginning of my relationship with Ramji, I ran that word through Ramji to understand his take on that word. He said it's a good word as long as we properly define it, you know? So it's the knowingness, consciousness is that which allows us to know anything that appears in duality, okay? So once Maya operates, we see the world of objects, and then this conscious existence appears as the knowledge, as knowingness, as the ability to know, the power to know, okay? It illumines, it reveals, and it knows. So this is all about consciousness, the illuminator and the knower, the knowledge, okay? The conscious knowledge. So this is a good point. Let me just fix this here. Otherwise it keeps changing, going off every 2-3 minutes. Limitless consciousness is existence and it is knowledge. So we have no doubt about that. We are sure that this conscious existence of us is equal to knowledge, to ability to know, to understand, to see, to witness, and so on. And it says that this conscious existence knowledge is self-evident. Now, who still has any doubt about this self-evident feature about conscious existence? I mean, do we have any doubt about this feature as ever self-evident. Let's go one by one. Self-evident. What is something that is self-evident? It does not need anything to make it evident. It's self-luminous. It's evident. It's obvious. It's always there, shine on its own. This knowledge, which is a conscious principle that not only illumines but knows the world of objects, it's also self-evident. Self-evident means to say that it shines on its own, it exists on its own, and it's conscious on its own, okay? It does not require any other source of knowledge. It does not require any other source of existence or any other source of consciousness. Okay, it has its own source. In fact, it is the very, very, very source of consciousness, the consciousness that we experience shining in our intellects as knowingness, as knowledge, okay? So it has its own source of conscious knowledge existence, therefore it is self-luminous. So when we have something that is self-luminous, it means to say that it does not require any other principle to reveal itself, you know? So when we have a light that shines on its own, and we say, okay, I want to know this light, yeah? Okay, and then bring your torchlight or a candle or anything to take a look and see this light. Do we need an extra or secondary source of light to see light? No, because light is self-luminous. Consciousness is self-evident, it's self-effulgent, it's self-evident, luminous. It's always ever present, the next feature here. It's always evident and it's all the time shining. There is nothing, there is nothing that we need to know to validate its present existence. You know, it's always present, shine on its own, and it shines through the intellect of all jivas. Therefore, we do not need to look for it. This feature, self-evident, is really, is really, I forgot an expression, American expression, but it's really something for us, you know? It means to say we do not need to look for it. Do you follow that? That we do not need to look for it because it shines at all times as the eye that we refer to again and again. That is this self-evident conscious knowledge existence that shines on its own at all times. It is self-evident. If it's self-evident, it illumines itself. It does not need to be searched. You know, we do not need to seek for it because it's shining in our intellect at all times. You understand, Karen? It is self-evident. It's ever present. Oh no, it's not ever present because sometimes I'm doing things and then I'm too unconscious and then I cut my finger, you know? So it means that I was not present. No, consciousness is always present, right? So the state of one's mind is what changes. And sometimes it goes completely off as we go into deep sleep, okay? The mind goes on and off and changes from moment to moment due to the gunas, the three energies, changing its proportions all the time. And then sometimes I'm too stressed out, what happens? I have too many thoughts, you know, running through the screen of my conscious knowledge, and then too many thoughts. And then my mind has trouble, difficult to process experience because there are too many things going on, one after the other, and then I make mistakes. I do not respond appropriately. I'm going to peel my vegetable, but I'm thinking of 2, 3 things, 4 things at the same time. When I see, I'm peeling the carrots, but I'm thinking of somebody who has offended me, and then I want to cut someone's finger, and I cut my own finger. You understand? So the mind change, yeah? But consciousness does not. And consciousness is always present. And then we would say, well, wait a moment, but when I'm in deep sleep, there is no consciousness. And then Vedanta comes back and explains the teaching of the three states and reveals and demonstrates to us that we exist as a conscious existence, limitless principle through the three states, even the deep sleep. We are always there. And we are experiencing the deep sleep, which is nothing but the absence of duality, or the absence of objects, you know, which is, in truth is not really absence of objects. It's just the prana jiva experience, no objects, or the absence of objects, which is by itself a sort of object. Why? Because the prana jiva knows that it has experienced nothing. So therefore, it still is experience. So we are ever present through all the three states, all the fancy states, all the esoteric and mystic states. We are there all the time, shining. And then it says again that limitless consciousness is pure. Pure means to say there is only consciousness. There is nothing other than consciousness. There is nothing other than consciousness, this knowingness principle, this existence principle. And this principle is pure, is limitless. Pure and limitless goes to the same feature, meaning to say there is no limitation, there is no border, there is no place where I end and something else begins. Consciousness is that which pervades all universe and goes beyond the manifestation of the universe. It pervades everything. There is nothing other than myself, therefore it's pure. Pure, there are no inclusion, there is nothing other than myself. So we are pure, we are consciousness, we are ever present. And this self-limitless consciousness, existence, and knowledge is self-shining, self-evident. And then, of course, we are beyond Maya, because we know that Maya is just in a power within consciousness, within ourselves, that somehow from time to time projects this manifestation of names, colors, and forms, so that the jiva, which is one among all other objects, can begin transacting for the purpose of processing karma and purifying until it understands that I am self-shining, self-evident, ever-present. I don't change to any of these transactions, to any of these experiences. That's the purpose of this dualistic order of reality, this apparent order of reality, according to the scriptures, you know? It's a play, it's a funny play. And then it says that it's beyond Maya, and it is the joy which is unconditioned by time-bound experiences. So this is very, very nice, because it says again in the first verse of the Vivekachudamani, it says that consciousness is our nature, and it is of the nature of joy and security. So this joy again and again appears in the Vivekachudamani as one of the features of consciousness, one of the natures of consciousness. It is the joy which does not depend on experience. Experience is time-bound. What is the problem with experience? The problem with experience is that it is bound by time. It's limited by time. Every experience has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the intensity keeps changing. When we experience good, blissful experience, we go through Priya, Moda, and Pramoda, those variations, you know, it keeps changing the intensity, and has the beginning, a middle, and an end. It says that Our conscious existence is beyond experience, and it's not conditioned by experience. It's beyond Maya, and it is the joy which is free from experience. So there is a joy within every one of us that does not depend on the field and the experience that the field, you know, propitiates to us from a moment to moment. There is a principle within us that is free from the experience, does not change. It means to say I am free. I do not modify with experience, I consciousness, okay? And I am the substratum of everything. I do not change. Therefore, experience do not change me. Do not condition me. And when nothing changes us, we remain as our nature of consciousness. And then there is this sense of completion, you know, of limitlessness and of joy, because the suffering, this samsara kind of experience most of us have, this sense of inadequacy and incompletion and smallness and so on. Those are all very uncomfortable feelings that they are far from being a joyful experience, you know. A joyful experience is every time that we feel complete, full, complete, whole, you know, nothing's lacking, nothing missing here. I'm okay, I'm good as I am, and so on. So knowing that we are limitless consciousness and existence, and knowledge that we are self-evident, ever-present, we are pure, and we are that before, beyond Maya, it gives us this sense of security and joy, which is inherent of the knowledge regarding my true nature. The knowledge regarding my true nature allows the jiva immediately, you know, transact with a sense of security and joy, which derives from this certainty of knowledge that I am consciousness. I'm not the mind. I'm consciousness. I'm not my intellect. I do not change. The intellect change. I do not change. The mind change. Okay, the body change and the field changes all the time. Therefore, I don't care for trying to manipulate and control the field. I do not want to work on the setup of the field. I want to work on my mindset. Like Paramarthananda likes to say, do not try to work on the setup, work on your mindset. When he says that, he means to say, get this knowledge firm in your mind, in your intellect, understand? So that you can transact in the field, knowing that you do not change because you are the substratum of the field, the entire Dhamma field, the entire universe, and so on, all universe. So this is the experience of joy, which does not depend on experience. So experience may be favorable, experience may be very, very adverse. And this certainty of self-knowledge gives us this cushion, gives us this assurance, you know, or this buffer, or howsoever we want to, or airbag against the impacts of life, you understand? So that we can transact with this confidence in our mind, in our intellect, about our true nature. So does anybody have anything to add to it? We feel we know something when we can define it. Definitions separate objects from each another by describing their limits, but the self is limitless. Okay. So here, the commentary here begins analyzing the word limitless. This is a very important point. I skipped the limitless word there. With Vedanta, we need to dig into every word, you know? So limitless. So everything that exists in creation is limited, is limited by its attributes. the attributes, the qualities, the functions, the properties, defines everything there is in Nitya. So when we talk in terms of the human jiva, so it is defined by its qualities, its talents, its functions, its professions and abilities and so on. So we are defined by our attributes, our qualities, our properties, etc. So we can be defined. I am a doctor, I am a this, I am a nurse, I am a professor, I am a teacher, I am a coach or whatever. So we can define anything that exists within the realm of the three energies, the three gunas. We know something when we can define it. When we define things, we separate things from one another, because every constitution of Maya is unique. There is an expression that says that there are no two snowflakes that are exactly the same in the Himalayas. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how many, it's numberless, the number of flakes, snowflakes in the Himalaya, and yet there are no two same people, So everything is defined by its uniqueness, which is its structure, Definitions separate objects from one another. And these very definitions, these very properties that define things, what it does, it limits it. You understand? Everything is defined by its properties and attributes and qualities. And when we define something, what we are doing? We are defining something, and by defining something, we are limiting it. Okay? So if I define Lynn as a woman, for example, what I'm doing to her, rather than say that Lynn is a human being, I say it's a human. So I'm just divide and separate her from the other class called the men and the gays, So everything that defines us limits us. It means that Lynn cannot be a man, Lynn cannot be gay or whatever, Everything that we define, we are limiting. And then says, but the self is that which is again and again and again described as limitless. So limitless means that which has no attributes. And the self, again and again in the scriptures, is described as attributeless. Attributeless. It's before Maya, as it says. It's before or beyond Maya. Before Maya comes into the play, there are no gunas. There are no subtle elements. There is nothing that could bring together and constitute an object immediate. So the self is free. It's not colored by the gunas, okay? So this self is limitless, and that's what it means, limitless. And limitless is the word that indicates to our nature as joy as well. It's interesting. It is the knowledge regarding our limitless nature that allows us this ananta, this joy, okay? So this joy is directly connected with this knowledge about our limitless nature, okay? That which cannot be defined because it has no attributes, and it feels very, very secure and joyful. Why? Because there is nothing limiting us. You understand? If I tell that I am a teacher, I am a guru, I am a guy, I am Brazilian, I am a retired middle-aged man, or whatever I say. Anything I say about myself is limiting me, right? But when I say I am conscious existence, and consciousness is of the nature of limitlessness. And then I'm destroying all limitations. What does that say about us? It says that all limitations, they refer, they are only relevant to my secondary nature as a jiva, not as my primary nature as such as consciousness. Okay? So we can live operating nature, transacting through our secondary nature as a jiva, knowing that our primary nature, and then we can yet be a jiva, but with this sense of security and joy because we understand the limitless nature of our primary identity as consciousness. You understand? So this self is limitless. Limitlessness is what gives us a sense of satisfaction and joy because it means there is nothing limiting me. Have you ever noticed that all our desires and aversions limit again and again from moment to moment to moment to moment? Every time we say, I need this, or I have to get rid of something, I need to avoid something, or I need to gain something, I need to accomplish something, I need it, you know, or I need it. Anytime that we put ourselves in that situation, we are limited by what we want and we do not have, or by what we have but we wish we would not have. So we feel limited. You understand? That is something that is not in harmony with my likes and dislikes, by my desires and aversions. So my desires and aversions somehow they are not, you know, aligned with what life is bringing to me, or better said, what life is bringing to me, Ishwar is bringing to me, is not conform to my likes and dislikes. And then I feel limited. I feel limited because I want what I want and I don't want what I don't want. And Ishwara does not give a damn to any of our likes and dislikes. Have we noticed that? Huh? So Ishwara does not care because Ishwara sees the interest, the need of the total, not of each one of us. No? And he says, so if you want to get what you want, so you need to work hard. You have to keep me, the Lord, in your mind and work hard and follow the Dharma, the laws governing the field and so on. And then you may have a successful life as far as your likes and dislikes is concerned, you know. So the self is limitless. It has no desires. It has no ambitions. It has no sense of something is lacking or missing or something is too many or too much. No, it's just beyond. It's before all these attributes of Maya. It has no spatial boundary, as do physical objects, nor has it a temporary boundary. So it's beyond time and space. There is no space boundary. There is no place in which consciousness, this nature of us, it is limitless. So therefore there are no boundaries. There is no spatial boundary, as do physical objects. Every physical object is defined not only by its properties and attributes, but by its spatial boundary. Of course, we are now referring to the physical objects. Physical objects have boundaries. But if we think of an emotion, for example, feeling, a feeling, an emotion is an object, but it's an object which is formless. Therefore, it has no boundaries. But here it's referring to the physical material object. It has no limitless consciousness, has no spatial boundary, as do physical objects, nor has it a temporary boundary. It means time does not limit consciousness because all physical and subtle objects are bound by time. Every and any kind of emotion or state of mind or any one of these subtle objects, even memories, they fade from the conscious mind. Everything, it has an end, every subtle and gross object has a beginning and an end. So it's bound by time. It has a temporal boundary, but not consciousness. Thoughts and feelings do have a temporal boundary. Consciousness also does not possess certain attributes and not other attributes. So every object is defined by certain attributes, and of course there is no object that contains all attributes of Maya. You know, if we could have an object that had all attributes of Maya, we would be talking about what? We'll be talking about Ishvara. You understand? Ishvara is that principle that has all the attributes of Maya. Yeah? Plus its nature as the attributeless conscious existence. Yeah? But the jivas and all other objects, we are very limited. And we have certain attributes, but not all attributes. Very small little attributes. And then the jiva keeps comparing itself with Sadhu. That guy, that woman has better attributes than I do, you know? And the people who are fixated with the physical body and say, oh, look, it's prettier than me, it's taller than me, you know, younger than me, and, you know, and smarter than me, richer than me. So we can go crazy the moment that we start looking at our qualities and attributes and looking around, comparing and doing all these crazy things that human jivas do in general. Yeah? But this is all about the jiva. But yet we are told that this consciousness that has no spatial boundary, it has no attributes, you know, and has no what? There's no limits, and there's no definition for it, and yet we are told again and again in the scriptures that this consciousness can be known. That's the point. We only know things that are defined by its attributes, by its colors and forms, you know, and functions, and then we say, okay, now I know something here. Okay, and I know it against other things that I know, because knowledge keeps splitting things and breaking things and splitting and separating things. So, but it says that consciousness cannot be known that way, but yet we are told again and again that consciousness can be known. How can we know that which cannot be defined? So, and then here, again, Dayananda says, we are told in the verse number 1 that the words of the Upanishads are the only means of knowing the self. We cannot know it as an object of knowledge. So meaning to say that the sense organs, the perception, the sense perception, plus the intellect are not a proper means to know the self. Why? Because the self is not an object of perception, it's not an object of experience, and it's not an object of knowledge. It's not an object, period. So the consciousness, this nature of ours as consciousness or Brahman or howsoever we want to call it, cannot be known because it has no attributes, it has no definition, but yet in the verse number 1, we heard that the words of Upanishads saying that it can be known, and the only means of knowing this consciousness, existence, the self, is the Upanishads, the words of the Upanishad, the words of Vedanta. So these scriptures, they are the means by which the self can be known. I mean, what kind of means of knowledge is that? Right. What kinds of knowledge is that? Means of knowledge, yeah? Pramana. What kind of pramana is that? Yeah? Which is a knowledge of something that is not an object, which has no definition, has nothing, you know, no limitations, no characteristics. So how can we have a means of knowledge to reveal something that does not really exist as this or that, you know? So this means of knowledge is a very unique means of knowledge. It's a means of knowledge that goes by logic, just re-examining our day-to-day common experience of life, carefully, attentively, so that we can gradually cancel all those mistaken notions that tells us that I am the body mind. So when we cancel all these wrong notions, mistaken notions, limiting notions, insulting notions, when we cancel that by logic, by analysis, analyzing, following the knowledge as presented by the Upanishad, and then what this means of knowledge does. Does this means of knowledge produce the self? Like the sage. Did the sage produce the 10th man? No. So this means of knowledge removes all the wrong notions about the absence of the self or the 10th man. It just removes our ignorance. It only cancels our ignorance. Therefore, these means of knowledge, being the Upanishads or the teachings of Vedanta, it produces the self, the better word is reveals the self indirectly or directly, howsoever you want to see it. Indirectly meaning to say it cannot show the self and say, this is the self, It has to remove the notions that we have about this I, the self, until we see that the I, the self, is what our nature is, because it's the only conscious existence there is. So it's going to reveal the self by removing the notions that we are not the self, removing the notion that the 10th man is missing, and so on. We are told the self is limitless consciousness, which is existence and knowledge. The Vedantic words indicating the nature of the self are existence, knowledge, or consciousness, and limitless, which is Sat Chitananda. So we are provided with a definition that is a set of words that appear to describe the self by distinguishing it from objects. So we are being presented the nature of the self is Sat Chitananda. But what is the difference between the nature of something and the attributes or properties or qualities of something? Because if we have some properties or qualities, these properties and qualities may be there, may be changing, may be present today and absent tomorrow, okay? But when we go and we talk about the nature of something, is that without which that thing cannot be that thing. Understand? So therefore, Sat Chitananda, existence, consciousness, and limitlessness is not an attribute of the self. It's not a quality of the self. That's why the Upanishads again and again says the self is attributeless, but itself has its own nature. The nature is Sat Chitananda, is that which is the core of the entire existence. Everything there is in all the universe is this nature, Sat Chitananda. So we are told that self is limitless consciousness, which is existence and knowledge. The Vedantic words indicating the nature of the self are existence, knowledge, limitlessness, Sat Chitananda. So we are provided with a definition that is a set of words that appear to describe the self. It appears that it's described the self by distinguishing it from all other objects, okay? But is that really so? Let me see now what the commentary goes on saying. One of those words, however, is limitless, because a lot of these objects, we know that consciousness or existence, sat, it borrows, it lends, it propitiates, it gives existence to everything in Nietzsche. So we see that everything has this feature called existence. And then we know that every jiva has a certain feature called knowledge or consciousness because it shines in the intellect of all jivas. You understand? But there is no individual jiva and there is no inert object that is limitless, right? Everything is limited because it is a constitution, yeah, reduced by Maya, arranging the gunas and the five elements and so on, and then it comes with these numberless, constitutions of the three energies. So, and everything is limited by its own design. The design of everything is going to limit everything there is as an object. So one of those words, however, is limitless. That which is limitless cannot be separated from object. Separated from object. So because there are no objects that are limitless, we cannot distinguish consciousness from the objects in the sense. We cannot say that the self, the objects, they shine, they exist in the same way that the self exists, because the limitlessness is not a feature given to any object. Everything is Nietzsche is bound by time. It's an appearance and it's bound by time. In fact, limitless existence makes distinct objects impossible. So let me understand better what these words are pointing to here. One of those words, however, when we say here that a set of words that appear to describe the self is Satchitananda, it's every definition, as we said, that describes something. We describe something against other things, distinguishing one thing against other things from other objects. Now, one of these words, however, is limitless. That which is limitless cannot be distinguished from other objects, in a way, because all objects are of the nature of limitation, and consciousness is the only principle that is of the nature of limitlessness. Therefore, it does not belong to the same order of reality of the same object. So we cannot really distinguish consciousness, because consciousness is the substratum, is the nature of all apparent objects, okay? They borrow existence, they borrow consciousness, some of these objects, but they are made out of consciousness, but they belong to a different order of reality. Therefore, we cannot distinguish really consciousness from their objects, okay? In fact, limitless existence, meaning to say consciousness, is what makes distinct object impossible. It is language reaching its limit where words become signposts rather than destinations. So again, that which is limitless cannot be separated from object, cannot be distinguished because it belongs to a different order, okay? In Nietzsche, everything is limited. In fact, that's the sentence that I need you guys' help here to understand it more clearly. In fact, limitless existence, this limitless object makes distinct objects impossible. So if we realize the limitless existence, which is the nature of everything, and then what does that happen? It makes non-duality, collapse, makes non-duality, although experience makes it an impossibility. So that's what it says. So that which is limitless cannot be separated, distinct from object. In fact, this limitless existence makes distinct objects not possible, okay? So this existence, which is limitless, which somehow concedes, propitiates this existence, apparent existence to distinct objects, in truth, it makes it impossible once it's really understood the limitless nature behind, or through everything, okay? I think that's what Dayananda is trying to point out, or Dayananda, I don't know, Ramji has added very little, but Ed has added a little bit on the words of Dayananda here. Does anybody have any any commentary about this sentence, please? Lynn, sometimes you shed some nice light in this description.
Oh, well, here's hoping. I just reminds me of Ramji's sentence where he says that Maya makes the impossible possible.
Yeah, something on those lines. Yeah.
Also, I think objects are unreal then, because they don't exist.
Did you hear to Russo, because it was catching at my end here? Did you hear? Russo, your connection.
I said
so good.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I think he's suggesting that objects are not real.
Yeah, that's what that suggests here. It's on those lines. Distinct objects are just not real. It's impossible once we realize the limitless nature of existence consciousness, you understand? In fact, limitless existence makes distinct objects impossible. It's its language reaching its limit, where words become signposts rather than destinations. The verse begins with the word limitless, which qualifies awareness. And awareness is then equated to existence and knowledge. As we have no experience of any limitless object, we know the self cannot be experienced as an object, so we can stop looking for it as a discrete object in time and space. That's the point, and I think I have covered it at the beginning quite extensively. We do, however, experience things that exist and about which we have certain knowledge. So how can existence and knowledge describe the self? All objects we experience exist in time, so their existence is not limitless. Are we then confronted with two kinds of existence, limit and limitless? Limited existence would require that which is not real in the beginning, nor in the end, to be somehow real in the middle. From where would such existence arrive, and into what would it dissolve? And how would it be maintained for a set amount of time? More than 2,500 years ago, a Greek thinker from Parmenides said that nothing comes into being or goes out of being, for no being does not exist. Therefore, there is no time when that which is was not, nor when that which is can cease to be. In fact, time, which is a measure of change, cannot be, for change requires an interim state of non-being. As one thing ceased to be what it was and become something it was not. How about that? Have you enjoyed it? Okay. We do, however, experience things that exist. We know that we experience things that exist, and we know that we have some knowledge. So there are a lot of phenomenal objects that we experience, and experience phenomenal objects allows us to know some aspects of these objects. We know that these objects are just a trick, the trick of Maya. The Maya produced all this world of objects, you know, the apparent reality of objects. And we, being one object among many others, we jivas, we experience objects. And we know that they exist, and we somehow gain some knowledge about them. Now, how can existence and knowledge describe the self? we have knowledge about these objects. Now, how can existence and knowledge describe the self? So this knowledge, this existence that we use to know the objects, how can this existence and knowledge describe the self? All the objects we perceive exist in time, so their existence is not limitless. So are we then confronted with two kinds of existence, limited and limitless? So this is the point here. The point is that this limitless existence is the source of consciousness, knowledge, existence. And this source is limitless. And this source, it propitiates or concedes or provides or gives this existence and consciousness to the objects of Mithya, to these apparent objects of the Mithya. But the existence and the consciousness and the knowledge of the jivas, or the existence of all inert objects, they are not limitless existence. Why? Because they are configurations of the three energies. They are bound by time and space. They have a beginning in the middle, and they are defined by its properties and so on. Therefore, it's not limitless. And then, yes, there is limitless existence as the substratum of nature of the universe. And then there are the numberless objects in the creation that they enjoy a certain degree of existence. And the jivas, they enjoy a certain degree of knowledge and consciousness. But these objects are not limitless. The only limitless principle is the substratum of all objects, the sentient and the inert objects. Their nature is limitless consciousness, but their configuration is limited, okay? Therefore, it is the case that there is only one. The nature of reality is non-duality, as we say. There are no two kinds of existence, but it appears as if there are two kinds of existence. Understand? One existence which is free and independent, because the existence of everything in Mithya, although they exist, they exist dependently. Everything depends on existence, consciousness, existence for existing. Every jiva depends on consciousness, existence to exist and be conscious. So jivas, they own its existence and knowledge to consciousness. We enjoy a dependent existence. Whereas consciousness existence, Satchitananda or Brahman, enjoys an independent existence, okay? Independent consciousness. It's just these two orders of reality in which there is the source of existence. So let's say that way, it's the source of existence, consciousness, that somehow lends existence to this apparent secondary order of reality in which the objects appear to exist, but they are bound by time, bound by space, bound by its definitions, bound by its characteristics, and not only they enjoy a dependent existence because consciousness is the only source of real existence, okay? This is the point here. And then to this question, are there really two kinds of existence, limited and limitless? And then the commentary goes on saying, limited existence would require that which is not real in the beginning, nor in the end, to be somehow real in the middle. So now it's saying, it's impossible to have two kinds of existence. Now we're going to prove that this order of reality, it's just a mere appearance. We experience the existence of objects, but this existence of objects is almost as good as not real or non-existent, like Krishna says in one of the passages in the Gita, you understand? Why? Because to have something that it really exists, but it's limited, would require that which is not real in the beginning, nor in the end, nor in the end to be somewhat real in the middle. Okay? So what it means to say? It means to say that objects somehow they appear to exist. They appear as real, but they were not real before they came into configuration, before they came into formation, okay? Before they were assembled. So they were not real in the beginning, they were not exist in the beginning, they will not exist in the end, therefore they cannot really exist in the middle. This is one of the arguments that Vedanta or the Upanishads presents us again and again to indicate to us that reality is that which is always ever present, okay, and never changing. Therefore, anything that has a momentary appearance, a momentary apparent existence or existence, you know, cannot be reality. Because reality is that which is always ever present, never changing, you know, in contact with anything that belongs to this order of reality, which is a mere appearance. Why? Because it was not real before it came into configuration. It's not going to be existing after, and then it cannot really exist or really be real in the middle. That talks about us, our body-mind construct as well. Huh? That is the point. And then it goes on being more philosophical when it says, from where would such existence exist, and that's something that exists in the middle, from where would such existence rise, and into what existence it would dissolve? How can something exist in the middle, not in the past and not the future? So where this existence would come from, and where this existence would disappear into, you know? So if we have something, I see Cloud here in front of me. Cloud exists, but he did not exist some decades ago. He is not going to exist in a few decades in the future. So where its existence is going to disappear into, and where its existence came from, you know? So we would need what? We will need another source of existence, you know, and another source of non-existence. So in a source of non-existence that you can go into non-existence, or you can come from, actually, in this analysis, you would have to have a source of non-existence. And the point is that there is no such a thing as non-existence, okay? That's the entire point of this law. There is no such a thing as non-existence. Okay, I know that there are a lot of spiritual circles that defend this notion that there is something, such a thing as non-existent, but there isn't. Why? Why there isn't? Because to determine that there is such a thing as non-existence requires what? Requires someone who exists to really say and defend its point, yeah? That there is such a thing as non-existence. So you need to exist to say that there isn't existence before there isn't. There is existence. Consciousness is beyond time. You know, it's always ever present. There is no beginning of creation or manifestation. You understand? If manifestation would have the beginning, and then what would be before creation, before manifestation? So we say, no, time begins with the beginning of this manifestation. Time begins here, okay? Billions of years or whatever. I don't know how old this universe is. And then if we believe that this universe is real and it's bound by time and this is a reality, and then we say, okay, and how about before it came into existence? Okay? So we are measuring time from the beginning of creation. A creation that exists in the middle is not going to exist in the future. And before this time, what was there before? Was non-creation, non-existence? You understand? So existence cannot come out of non-existence. You understand? Non-existence implies existence. That's the point. From where would such existence arise, and into what it would dissolve, and how would it be maintained for a set amount of time? So long ago, a Greek thinker said that nothing comes into being or goes out of being because no being does not exist. Therefore, there is no time. when that which is was not. This conscious existence that we experience is beyond time. That's the point here. Understand? There is no point, there is no time, it does not exist. It exists during this manifestation, before and after the manifestation. Okay. And again, how can that which was not come to be? Nothing comes from nothing. This reason is simple. His conclusion is inescapable. Change is an illusion. This Greek thinker also concludes that thought and knowledge and being are identical, as we cannot think of that which is not. Thought, knowledge, and being are identical, as we cannot think of that which is not. We can only think about things that we know. Thought is always faithful to whatever we know, the object of knowledge. So we cannot think of something that's not. Every knowledge is about what is existence. This is a way of saying that existence and knowledge are identical. Existence, consciousness, and knowledge are identical. Posterity has generally found it more convenient to ignore Parmenides than to deal with his arguments. Vedanta, however, is at home with Parmenides and well in advance of him. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the soul's texts, says that which is real can never cease to be, and that which is not real can never come to be. The same principle. This is a very famous statement in the Gita. That which is real can never cease to exist. You know, the universe comes and goes, but that which is real never ceases to exist. And that which is not real can never really come to be. It's a mere illusion, a mere appearance. So there cannot be such a thing as limited existence. Limited existence does not really exist, but guess what? It appears to exist. It appears to exist because we perceive this world. So the perceived, all existence then must be limitless. Where am I? So there can be no such a thing as limited existence. That which for a time, then it's not. The implications of these truths radically oppose our usual way of thinking about things. We see the things and we believe that they are real, they exist. Again, this is just a passing phenomenon. It is experienceable, it is perceivable, but it's not real. That is how radical Vedanta is, when he talks about our nature as consciousness, existence. That which is always present, before and beyond the appearance and disappearance of the universe, of objects and so on. These realms of this universe. The implications of these truths radically oppose our usual way of thinking about things. It compels us to reject our perception of time-bounded existence as being real. All existence then must be limitless, for the only thing that could limit it would be non-existence. So when we perceive objects, we in fact experiencing limitless existence. Oh, how beautiful. Now it's really round. Now it's close. Now it's just proving that this apparent reality, this show, this movie, this projection, this superimposition we are seeing is limitless because its nature is nothing but existence, consciousness. Okay? We are just experiencing consciousness. We experience names and forms on that which is consciousness, existence. So when we perceive this limit, this apparently limit object, we in fact perceiving and experiencing and knowing limitless existence. All existence then must be limitless. For the only thing that could limit it would be non-existence, and we have the term that there is no such a thing as non-existence. There is only this ocean, this never end, this forever going, the substratum, this conscious existence, and then we have these projections, these superimpositions. So these objects, everything that appears superimposed, they appear as limited. But in truth, everything is there in this infinite ocean of existence, consciousness, and everything that's projected underneath must be limitless by nature because it's a projection on consciousness. We are the substratum. So everything is just appearing in this infinite screen of conscious existence. The perceived object as an independent event in space and time is as unreal as the snake in the rope. Again, more of these radical notions to say that this universe we see is just like the snake projecting the rope. We again and again we look into this metaphor, but we need to really stretch our minds to understand that the same thing is a fact. The same thing is in regards to this world, this universe, this cosmos, and these objects that we experience in our awakened state. They are just like the snake projecting the rope. The only reality is the rope. The self alone is the rope in this case. The above analysis of existence also implies to knowledge. So the same thing is to knowledge. If objects are really limitless existence, our knowledge to be true to the object must be equally limitless. So the knowledge is nothing but consciousness. This knowledge is limitless, although our ability as the jivas to know things is limited, okay? But this knowledge, this knowingness principle that allows us to know some of Ishwara's knowledge, some bits and pieces of Ishwara's knowledge, small little discoveries, uncoverings. So this knowledge is also limitless. This knowledge, this knowingness principle must be equally limitless. If only the self exists, only the self can be known. It's just consciousness, existence, experience and known itself. If only the self exists, only the self can be known. So this is another stretch. You say, so you want to know the self? You understand? Know that you are the self, and know that everything that you experience and know is the self, can only be the self. You experience yourself all the time. You say how cool and how out of the box those notions are, You are limitless conscious in existence, and you cannot be known as an object, and every object that you know is nothing but yourself. It's all limitless existence, apparent existence. That's very nice. If objects are really limitless existence, our knowledge to be true to the object must be equally limitless. If only the self exists, only the self can be known. Knowledge of objects is a succession of thoughts. So I'm sorry, if I knew that we were going such a philosophical kind of commentaries, I would have prepared this class today. Usually I don't, because it's very beautiful, but it's very philosophical, very subtle. If only the self exists, only the self can be known. Knowledge of objects is a succession of thoughts. So thought. But the serial thinking requires an interim stage in which one thought ends and another has not yet began, or else we would not be able to distinguish one thought from another. So it means to say that if only the self exists, only the self can be known. Knowledge of object is a succession of thoughts. We are having thoughts coming from the objects we perceive, or from our causal body, our unconscious mind. Thoughts of objects come, or thoughts coming from the field, and then these thoughts keep going on a succession. Thoughts, objects, thoughts. But this serial thinking process requires an interim stage in which one thought has ended and another has yet to begin. Otherwise, it would not be able to distinguish one thought from another. Meaning to say, we are this conscious existence. Knowledge, of course, through thoughts, but this conscious existence is the screen which allows us to distinguish one thought from the next thought, from the next thought, from the next thought. We must be there before every and any thought of object comes and fades. So that's our nature. That's what it means to say. But the serial thinking requires an interim stage in which one thought has ended and another has not yet begun, or else we would not be able to distinguish one thought from another. This interim stage is an absence of thought. Thought appears once what? Consciousness gets in contact, when Maya produces a thought object, and then consciousness illumines and reveals it. And then every time that this transaction happens, so there is a thought, okay? A thought is faithful, it's true to the object, okay? So this interim stage between one object / thought and another object / thought, the interim stage is an absence of thought, okay? There is no thought. So there is what? There is consciousness existence as the illuminator, or the knowingness that allows us to know every thought object. And we know things about these thoughts, thought. This interim stage is an absence of thought from the standpoint of objective knowledge. But what is this absence of thought? What is it in itself? This empty space, this gap between one thought and one object and another. What is this? This gap between awakened state and dreaming state. What is that gap? We say like, oh, it's nothingness, it's emptiness, it's the absence of transaction, the absence of duality, subject, object. So, but what is that in itself? It can only be consciousness. It can only be awareness. That which has no beginning and an end, not the beginning, middle, and end. It can only be consciousness awareness in which thoughts appear. And this awareness is ever present and unaffected by thoughts. The thoughts come and go, which can be nothing but awareness, despite their apparent diversity and seeming independence. How nicely, huh? All these thought objects, they appear to be independent. They exist as a superimposition on the screen of conscious awareness. They do not have an independent or separate existence. They do not exist apart from consciousness. Therefore, the nature of every object is limitless conscious awareness, but they appear to be independent and they appear to be limited by their name, color, and form. That's the point. So therefore, it appears to be. It can only be conscious awareness in which thoughts, objects appear and disappear. And this conscious awareness is ever present and unaffected by thoughts, by objects that come and go, which can be nothing. Nothing, these objects are nothing but consciousness awareness. Why? Because Every wave is a superposition on the ocean. So what is the nature of these waves? You know, it's ocean. You understand? Every ornament of gold is just a superimposition of gold. So what is the nature of these ornaments of gold? It's gold. So every object which is nothing but a superimposition in existence consciousness is nothing but limitless awareness. It's nothing but awareness, despite their apparent diversity and seeming independence. Okay? So this knowledge, sometimes they can go into very subtle philosophical analysis, but the purpose of these thoughts is to help us to understand, that that which we are is just this light of consciousness existence shining through all living creatures, even inert. Why we say that inert objects all shine with conscious existence? Because they all exist. When they exist, we know that there is sat and there is chit there, because everything is a configuration made out of consciousness, existence, of the nature of limitlessness. Everything is made out of consciousness. So when we see everything, we know that it's me, it's I. We are just evading everything. This conscious existence, the nature of everything, the substratum of everything. This knowledge gives us this confidence and this sense of security and peace and satisfaction to know that this is my nature. I'm not the configurations of the gunas and my bodies and the cultures and my experience, the states of my mind. I'm none of this. I'm conscious existence, the nature of everything. This is a very cool sort of knowledge that provides us with this sense of peace, contentment, satisfaction, and security, because there is no limitation for anything. Everything is of the nature of conscious existence, which is limitless by nature, because everything is just consciousness appearing as these different ornaments. Where we are. So if only the self exists, it still goes on. If only the self exists, only the self can be enjoyed. So all experiential pleasure is seemingly dependent upon time and space and objects and circumstance is a window opening into limitless joy, which is the nature of the self. How nice. So if we know that everything is the self, because everything that exists as the self, only the self can be enjoyed. So we are just playing with ourselves. So all experiential pleasure seemingly dependent upon time-bound objects and circumstance is an opportunity, a window of opportunity, an opening onto limitless joy, which is our nature, the nature of the self. So again, the whole thing about experiential bliss, it's as good as it can be, but every experience is only as good as the knowledge we can gain or extract from the experience. So if we experience the world of objects, and if we understand that the world of objects is of the nature of conscious existence, and then I know that there is only I experience Nietzsche, in this order of different diversity of names and forms. So, and then the whole of science, derived of the belief that this is all real and duality and plurality is real, and all of that somehow dissolves, and you just play in this world, and we can experience pleasure and knowing that it's just an opportunity, it's an opening into limitless joy, which is the nature of everything, of all objects, is of the nature of this joy. Joy is limitless. Yeah? When we think joy is in the object, the self forgets itself, as strange as it sounds. So this, this again takes us back to the knowledge and ignorance feature. if we have this clarity, this firm conviction of knowledge, and then we don't fall for this, this mistaken, belief that the objects are real source of joy, and they have an independent source of joy. We do not know that the joy lives within our own nature. We believe that, and then we are being operated by ignorance. So unfortunately, every time we see that, we fall into duality and we suffer. What is it? When we think joy is in the object, it is as if the self forgets itself, and the self begins chasing the illusions produced by ignorance, which again can only manifest in the self. So everything is a manifestation of the self, and the poor jiva is suffering because he's not aware that he's just experiencing itself, because his nature is not the body-mind, but it is consciousness existing. We experience satisfaction when the subject and the object cease to appear as distinct, and we realized as one. So again, when this subject and object can somehow collapse or cease to exist, because we have this clear and firm understanding about I'm just experience consciousness, existence, the nature of everything is consciousness, and reality is non-duality, and so on. This is just, an apparent reality. It's just a play of Maya and so on, with Ishwar. So when we leave from that platform of knowledge, we just have a good time. But when we forget, as if the self forgets itself, we are, by ignorance again, we are bound to the object. We experience satisfaction when the subject and the object cease to appear as duality. We then no longer regard ourselves as separate from all the other objects, and then we develop these ragas and veshas, desires and aversions towards the object. When we know the self, all sense of duality and separations, they tend to dissolve to the degree that this knowledge is kept alive in our intellect. The pain of longing and the fleeting satisfaction of possession arise from our identification with an individual body-mind. So that's the bottom line. The pain of longing for this fleeting satisfaction derived from gaining, accomplishing, possessing what I want is born out of this identification with the individual body-mind complex. We are always seeking to erase this sense of individuality. We want to dissolve this sense of individuality because unconsciously we want to reestablish our nature as limitlessness. Understand? So we again and again we keep trying to get what we want and to accomplish what we desire and so on, because we want to be done with this sense of individuality, separation, that distinguishes me from the other objects and makes me chasing things so that I can secure and enjoy myself indirectly by the means of other objects. This is the root of sorrow. We are always seeking the self, whether we know it or not. This is very nice. So whether we know it or not, we are always seeking to establish, or reestablish our limitless nature as the self, as consciousness. And we are doing that a lot of the time unconsciously, and indirectly, as I often put, by trying to gain or get things that we believe that we are lacking or missing. So therefore, we are always seeking the fullness of our own self, whether we know it or not. When we are told that the self is limitless existence, knowledge, and security and joy, we may think, how can I experience this self? For I am certainly not experiencing my fullness, limitlessness, and and enjoy here nature, you understand? So I mean, when we hear about the nature of the self, and they say, wow, okay, I want to get it. I want to find it. You know, where can I search it and seek and find it? Why? Because I'm not experienced this. I'm not experienced limitless fullness and completion and satisfaction, security and joy. So we are not experiencing it because, unfortunately, we are all being we are victimized or not victimized. You know, we are suffering from samsara. We are suffering from avidya, this universal ignorance imposed by Maya that projects the world of objects as reality. You know, and then we feel limited by what we wish to have but we cannot have, or what we don't want to have but we have. We are told the self is limitless existence, knowledge and joy, and then we may think, how can I experience the self? For I'm certainly not experiencing this joy and limitless now. So the answer is that we experience the self now. We are simply misinterpreting the experience in the reflect awareness we call the ego, which identifies with superior objects. The ego is the self dreaming. Vedanta is our wake-up call. The ego is the self dreaming. You know, it's the self under the spell of Maya or Vidya, ignorance. So Vedanta or the Upanishad is our wake-up call. When we dream, we manufacture all the people and objects which seem to exist independently of us, the self. Through its mysterious power of Maya, manifests all that appears as the world and that seems to exist independently of us. Through the teachings of Vedanta, we realize the self is all that is, ever was, and ever will be. Then the dream ends, and all the phantoms that torment us dissolve. We are free. So I want to, next class, I want to revisit some of these concepts in the end that I rushed in the middle as well. So with a little more time, and I began this class very tired. I was suffering a little bit of indigestion, and I got even more tired because it was very demanding kind of commentaries here. So next Monday, I want to, before we go into the verse 68, I will just summarize quickly some of these points here, and then we move on to the verse 68. Okay?
And we can ask questions for Thursday to discuss this?
Yes, please. So on Thursday, we do our Q&A, and we could also explore more if we have some questions regarding this, this verse. Okay? This could be a good Q&A as well. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everybody. So we meet again next Thursday. Much love. And I see you in no time and no space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Orlando.
Thank you.
Thanks, Arlinda.
Bye-bye.
Bye.